All right, so this is episode two, and I am fortunate to be joined by Mr. Ibrahim Mango. He is a positive psychologist, a life coach, and he's a catalyst for positive transformation. You've been in this in the field of positive psychology for years now, impacting lives with optimism, hope, strength, and helping people across the world achieve greater happiness and their goals. Like always, we will focus on learning about your work, your insights, and of course, loneliness, which is the central theme of these conversations. So, welcome, Ibrahim, and I'm glad that we are joined and we share some values and we share the same challenge the world is facing to work on. So thank you, and let's start with understanding a bit about your work. I understand you are focused on positive psychology. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. First, I want to thank you very much, Sid, for giving me this wonderful opportunity. First of all, to meet you uh, personally or virtually, rather. It's a great honor and a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to meet with people who are on a similar path, who are trying to make the positive change in the world and to alleviate suffering and to bring more happiness to the world. And I think that's a very honorable thing, especially when at this point in time we are facing the world is facing a lot of pain, a lot of misery, a lot of anguish. Um, I think this is a very important time in history to be doing this work. So thank you again for giving me this great opportunity.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So
So,
yeah,
positive psychology is your area of focus. Feel free to talk about your work, and we'd love to know your experience helping people. What are people confined by when it comes to loneliness, and anything that you would like to share?
sure. So yeah, I'm a life coach and a positive psychologist. My credential is I have a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology from the University of East London in England. And how the reason I became interested in this area wasn't because just like randomly I just decided it's something that is interesting. It is something that I've lived, something that I've experienced when I graduated from university. My first degree is in engineering, actually. I did engineering in Manchester University in England. So when I finished my degree, it was around 1994, and I came back to Jordan. I started working in the field, and after a few years, I found myself drowning deep into depression. And at the time, I didn't know what depression was. I only knew that I felt really bad and really, I felt that I was a bad person, that people around me were out to get me, and that the universe was hostile. Uh, and it was a very difficult time. And at the same time, because I had these negative ideas, negative thoughts about people around me. I was also very lonely. I felt very, very lonely. But at the time, I blamed others for my loneliness. I blamed them because I thought that they were the bad people. That's my perception. That was my perception. So it was a period when I suffered a lot. My life suffered. I couldn't work for many years. There were times, there were weeks at a time where I'd be bedridden. Was very difficult for me to get out of bed, even to do the simplest and the easiest of things, like getting out of bed and brushing my teeth. Uh, so it was a very, very difficult, very dark place a dark time in my life. Uh, Now, I started reading a lot. I started reading a lot, trying to find some solutions, some trying to find some strategies, some kind of tools that would help me feel better, that would help me become happier. So I started. The first thing that came to mind was Freud. So I went into the library. At the time, we still didn't have the luxury of the internet. So I went into this library in the British Council in Jordan, in Amman. That was one of the the biggest libraries in Jordan. So I went to the library and to the psychology section, and I took out a book by Freud, and I started reading. But I was very disappointed because Freud made me paranoid about my dreams and angry at my parents. So exactly what I didn't need. So I abandoned Freud. I thought Freud wasn't helpful at all. So gradually, I read more and I started psychotherapy. And I was in psychotherapy for many years. And it was it was very challenging, emotionally challenging, draining at times. There were times when I would laugh, but mostly I would cry. It was the therapy is a very difficult process. It was a very difficult process. Um, but I was able to gradually and very slowly to overcome my depression. And one thing that really helped me was one of my strengths is persistence. So in positive psychology, there are people have a variety of strengths in order of their importance. There are 24 universal strengths. So one of my top strengths, one of my top 5 strengths is persistence. So I used persistence in my quest and my challenge to improve myself. So that's another thing in positive psychology. When you use your strengths, that's when you are most successful. That's when you are happiest. That's when you are most engaged in the world and with people. So I used one of my main strengths, which is persistence, and very slowly, I overcame my depression. I had anxiety as well, but mainly I was suffering from depression. And after many years doing so much work and reading a lot and attending many different workshops and seminars and lectures, I learned many tools and I experienced a lot of emotional and personal growth. I came to the realization, I started valuing happiness. I started valuing well-being. So I started thinking about people who are actually suffering like I was, because I know exactly what it is and what it means to suffer. And when you're suffering, when you're depressed, you think that there is no hope. So I felt very strongly, this was the spark of inspiration that made me want to help people come out of depression. It's as though I wanted to tell them, it's as though I wanted to shake them and say, listen, there is hope. You can improve. Life can be better. Life can be nice. Life can be fulfilling. That was the time when I thought that that's my life's mission, to help people come out of depression, come out of suffering. At the time, I didn't know about positive psychology, so I only knew about psychology and psychotherapy. That's what I was experiencing, and I was looking for a course in psychology to learn more formally about psychology and become a psychologist. Uh, and then I found out that psychology or traditional psychology and psychotherapy focus on the problem that you have, the thing that you're suffering from, and the main aim is to alleviate suffering. Um, so that was my journey in psychotherapy. So psychotherapy focuses on your weakness and tries to alleviate your suffering and bring you to a point where you are, if you're successful, free from suffering. Um, but it stops there. They don't have, psychotherapy doesn't have any tools to increase happiness, to reach what Maslow describes as self-actualization or thriving or prosperity. So that's when I started reading about positive psychology, and it is something that caught my eye, caught my attention, and that's something that I realized that is what I want to concentrate on. So not only is it that I want to help people come out of their suffering, I also want to help people to experience joy, happiness, and thrive. So that's how I got interested in positive psychology, and that's how I got inspired to do my master's course, and work in that field.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I think, first of all, thank you for sharing your life story. It takes courage to share. And when I thought of doing or hosting such sessions and conversations, my aim was that can we have people who've done great, who are able to give back to the world, come forward and tell their stories and make others feel that everybody goes through it at one point of time, regardless of their age, your profession, where you are. It doesn't really matter a lot. What matters is we all have our own share. And I think I also realized that in a lot of cases of depression, anxiety, loneliness was found to be the cause. Just like you said, when we look at the surface, it may seem as we are experiencing depression, which is very true in itself. If you dig deeper and try to trace the roots and trace the cause of what's there on surface, you in a lot of cases, I can't say in all cases, but in a lot of cases, loneliness is sitting there at the bottom and driving these surfaces to these symptoms to the surface. And there was a study done on this as well, which found that almost 50% of the cases of depression are driven by loneliness somewhere. And it's not just one kind. It's not just the absence of people. It's the absence of meaningful connections. And I think that's broadly talked about today. Very interesting concept. I think the strengths that you were talking about in positive psychology, I may have taken that survey. It's called VIA strength, if I'm not wrong.
VIA,
VIA character
yes,
strength.
yes,
Yeah,
VIA
yeah,
strengths, character strengths. Yeah, this
yes,
work was.
yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
This was done by, I think, Martin Seligman when he started
Correct.
the positive
Yes,
psychology course.
and it is very, very thoroughly researched. And the interesting thing, and one of the most important things, is that these strengths are universal. So they cut through socio-economic layers, cultural differences. So we all have these strengths to different degrees.
Yeah,
And it's important. One of the aims of positive psychology is to help you find your strengths and use your strengths in a way that works for you. And as I said, when you're using your strengths, that's when you are at your best. You're producing your best work.
yes,
You are in harmony with the people around you, and this is such an important concept, because whether it's at work, whether it's in business, or whether it's with your family, um, or whether it's you're doing your hobbies, your strengths are always the things that you are trying to make the best use of. These are bring out the best in you. So yeah, that's the
Yes.
work of Martin Seligman, mainly Martin Seligman. That's right.
Yes. And the interesting thing is, as we relate these trends to ourselves, I think we kind of try and discover these trends. And for example, you came across positive psychology after you experienced something and you were looking for something positive in your life. Um, I always think that what if we start teaching our kids, like right from the school, their academic lives, right from a young age, how to find these trends? Because if you start early, the foundation that is built is going to be very strong, and you will start aligning with yourself. The alignment with self, I think, is the most essential human trait that in a lot of cases we're missing. We teach kids how to learn physics, and these days you don't even have to acquire knowledge, you don't have to work hard, you can do a brain implant, or you can ask ChatGPT, and there is an abundance of knowledge. Now, we are not living in those times when you really have to scan 20 books and then find what they meant. You can have the summary of a book or the key concepts in 5 minutes.
Correct.
But I think after all this knowledge, what we are lacking, it's my observation, is the wisdom to apply that knowledge that you acquire in your life. So the wisdom education part needs, I think it's a requisite to have a complete awareness of your strengths. In fact, this aligns with what I teach in meditation in the early days, is that discovery of self-awareness, basically, that talks about learning your values, your strengths. And everybody's born, like, this is a belief that I later discovered it's true, that we all are born with a gift. We all have at least one unique strength that makes us who we are. And if you are able to discover that right from the early age, then how good life can be. You can live your life with more alignment with self, a stronger connection, and really thrive in what you do, regardless of what you study. Because I think the true joy lives in doing what really means something to you. And a lot of people, if you ask at workplaces today, they are in their job or whatever profession they are because they have to. A lot of people. Not everyone is living their dream professional life. They have to, because there is some kind of compromise they have to do because money or whatever else. But I think how beautiful life can be if you know your strengths, if you know your gift, and if you know your purpose. I wonder, and I'd love your perspective on this. Like this one time I was teaching kids at a school, and a 13 or 14-year-old boy, he asked me a question, and he said, I feel so empty inside. What do I do? What is the purpose of life? And at that time, obviously, it was a shocking question coming from a 14-year-old, but then it became a trend. I met so many 13, 12 years, 14, 15 years old boys and girls who were asking the same question. It was, and it's not years ago, it's just present day. I'm talking a year ago. This event was, I think, in 2022. But the point is, kids are asking that question. We don't have to wait for midlife crisis to happen and shake us and look for such questions. It's happening today. What is your perspective, I'm wondering, is about discovering yourself? And do you think there may be a correlation between the unawareness of self, if that's the right term, between not knowing who you are and living a fulfilling life?
Yes, yes, definitely, of course. To me, and the way I think, because I think a lot about these issues, and especially as you mentioned, how they relate to education. And only recently has there been a movement towards what they call positive education. Uh, but if I go back a little bit and talk about uh, how education traditionally has been and throughout the world, it follows the same philosophy. It is what I would call an objective education. We call it learning the three R's: the arithmetic, the reading, and the writing. So we are taught, if you want to call them outward skills, they're not inner skills, they're outward skills. It's things that we would use objectively that would help us to get a good sort of a good job. And as you alluded to, a good would imply something that possibly I made some adjustments to my life. I made some sacrifices in order to be in this job. It's not really my dream. It's because I had to, like you said. So yes, it's very important, and I think now people are starting to realize it, and especially positive uh, psychologists, that it is not only the three R's that we have to learn. It's not only the outward world we have to learn about. It's not geography, history, and mathematics, and possibly a new language. These are very important. I'm not in any way trying to imply that these are not as important. These are very important. These are vital. But there's another vital side which we so far have been neglecting, which is not just the outward world; it's the inner world. It's how you do you know yourself? Who are you? Like Sid, you just mentioned. Do you know who you are? Who are you? What is your aim in life? Why are you here? We don't have these questions in most schools around the world. We don't know who we are. Kids uh, can't sit there quietly for maybe 3 minutes without needing some distraction, without needing some kind of social media or a video game to distract them. We can't sit with ourselves quietly for a few minutes. And that is your specialty, of course, Sid, meditation and being able to sit there with your thoughts and accept your thoughts non-judgmentally. Um, so in education, we're not taught to experience our own being and who we are. Um, and we're not encouraged to learn about our subjective self, about our interests, about our strengths, as you mentioned, because eventually, at the end of the day, when you go out into the world, all these objective skills that we talked about, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, and all the facts, and as you mentioned very rightly, the facts are, especially now, and they're becoming much, much easier to get. Uh, you just go on a Google search or to now recently ChatGPT, and you can get all the raw information that you need. But how you actually execute it, how do you actually make use of it in the world? My son Fahad, who's 14, he's very much into business, and he's very talented in that area. And he's asking me, "Okay, Dad," he goes, "I'm interested to learn to study business at university." And what they teach at university about business uh, is great. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it per se. What they teach is correct. I'm not a very. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm a fantastic. I don't have an MBA, for example. But what they teach you in MBA? They don't really teach you the inner mindset. They don't give you anything to do with how to work with yourself. And when it comes to business, for example, it's so much to do with your mindset. In addition to the knowledge that you need, of course, but it's the inner mindset. Is how do you think of yourself? What do you think of yourself? Do you think yourself as a? Do you see yourself as somebody who's worthy to make money? Are you? Do you see yourself as somebody who wants to serve people, who wants to make a positive impact in the world while uh, sharing your gift or your talent? Like you mentioned, everybody has a talent, at least. Even the people, even the kids at school who are getting bad grades, have a talent that if we concentrate on and if we nurture, they can really make a difference in this world. And that's also one thing, whether it's an MBA or whether it's in a third class mathematics classroom, it's it's overlooking, or it's not concentrating enough on us as people, on kids as people who have an inner world of themselves, who have an inner world that needs to be nurtured. So it has to be a very personal. We are on a personal journey, and education can do so much to help us on this personal journey, to help us find out our strengths, to find out our gifts, and how to polish these gifts, and how to present them to the world, how to serve the world. So we still have, as an educational system all over the world, it's we still are lacking very much in the inner education. We're doing really well in the outer education, but the inner education
Yes.
is something that is very important. And only recently have people, people in education have noticed and how important this is, and they're concentrating on this. And positive psychology is making a big contribution in that area, and in many schools around the world, mainly in Europe and the US, and in other areas as well, but mainly in Europe and the US. There has been a lot of very successful cases of positive education, where kids are taught that they are valuable, that they can, that they are able, to, especially when they use their strengths, they can achieve. Uh, we're not taught these things at school. We're not encouraged at school to look at our strengths, to think about how we can contribute to
Yes.
the world.
Even though it's reactive in a way, this approach where we are teaching kids now instead of being proactive about this, but it still is a welcome change, and this was a must. So it's like I think about this in a way that you are acquiring all the good stuff from the world, the knowledge and about different skills, different subjects, the universe, and we know everything about the universe now. If you want to learn about it, it's there. But where you put that knowledge, the knowledge that you acquire from the world, where you put that space is not even organized. You don't even know that space, which is your mind. And what are you going to do with that knowledge if you don't know where to put it, or at least how to organize that within? If you don't clean up your space, and if you don't realize where you are going to store this knowledge and how you are going to process it, it's useless in most cases. And that's why most knowledgeable people are beaten by the most wiser people. That's why we move, or like aspire to transit from being knowledgeable to being wise, which comes usually with the age, but it doesn't have to. You don't have to suffer any in your adult life or in your as a young adult or even as a teenager, because nobody taught you how to know yourself, because nobody taught you to find, this is something I talk about in my classes, where I say the three questions everyone must have the answers to: who are you, where are you, and where do you belong, where are you supposed to be. I'm talking in context of physical as well as your emotional and your spiritual space. So realizing who you are, your identity, the strengths that you rightly talked about, your values, of course, and then realizing where are you in your life. And you don't have to wait 30 years and go through a midlife crisis to begin looking for those answers. Those should be taught in school, at least in the basic sense that if you're learning maths or physics, why are you learning it in the first place, and what are you going to do with that, when you grow up. It's not necessary to teach them about spirituality or deeper stuff, but at least the basic reasoning, the basic logic behind learning, and say what you are doing is acquiring knowledge, and what you need to process that knowledge is wisdom. But unfortunately, like until recently, we didn't have schools of wisdom. We had schools of knowledge, and we've always had schools of knowledge. But in East, kids were taught how to acquire wisdom. It was about life education. It was about living a meaningful life and making sense of things. But it's happening. I also I wrote down a question that you mentioned something about being restless, and this is something I observe. Like, my work is obviously observing my surroundings, what is happening around me, what is happening inside me, and I observed that, and I read this as a quote, that every minute a phone is pulled out, as if we are running away from something. So every idle moment, a phone is pulled out. If we are, let's say, having conversation at a dinner table or public transport, if you have an idle moment, you would see that a phone is pulled out, as if we are trying to escape from something. And I wonder, that makes me question self and people. Is it that difficult to spend a moment with yourself?
Exactly.
Like, is it so unbearable that you have to take support, or you have to lose yourself in that little world, that you can't sit with
Yeah.
yourself? And where is that restlessness leading
Yeah.
you? Why are we so desperate to get away from ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something I teach, yes, but I would love your perspective on this.
Yeah. Yeah. This is very interesting and very important at the same time. Um, we are out of force of habit. Whenever there's an idle moment, like you mentioned, whether it's even if you're sitting alone, uh, if you're reading something or if you're working on your computer, and there's an idle moment, you pull out your either you turn on the music, you turn on the news, or you pull out the phone, you make a phone call, or you check your social media. Um, it's as though we can't sit with ourselves. It's as though you can't. There's this inner restlessness. Um, I've talked a lot to friends of mine about this, and in my workshops, I also mention it sometimes. It's as though people you can't sit with yourself because you can't deal with the thoughts and the emotions that are bubbling up. You don't like what's coming up. You can't sit with the thoughts that are coming up. And the way I the way I'm learning to learn to overcome, not to overcome this, but how to, the way I'm learning how to deal with this is to using some meditation practices, is to sit there and watch my thoughts as they come up. This is the difficult part, and just watch them non-judgmentally without being attached to them. I think that's where the difficulty lies, is because every thought that comes up, you're attached to this thought, and it takes you places where usually they're not very comfortable. And then if you change, if your mind jumps on another thought, you're immediately attached emotionally to that thought, and it's as though you are in a continuous movement, like darting around in different thoughts and different emotions, which is very, very um, uncomfortable. So sometimes with my kids, I tell them, I talk to them a lot about the meditation and sitting quietly and start trying to be away from social media and video games. So I always tell them, you're bored now. And sometimes they complain that they're bored. And I say, Omar, that's my son's name. I say, Omar, if you're bored, I tell you what to do. Sit there and meditate. And they always laugh because they say, okay, meditation is even more boring. So in a sense, it can be more boring, but I think it can be also very liberating when you know that you can watch those thoughts that are usually for us very uncomfortable, the thoughts and the feelings that come with them. These are very uncomfortable. But if you gradually learn how to sit with these thoughts, you learn how to be detached from the emotions that come up. That is when you start knowing yourself better. It's as though we are always trying to find these distractions, as you said, pulling out our phone, metaphorically. Possibly it could be something else. It could be going out and eating ice cream. It could be going out and drinking, something to distract ourselves from ourselves. So it's as though there's this taboo of knowing ourselves. And from what little I know about meditation or sitting with yourself, to put it very simply, is it's like a muscle that you train, and the more you train, the better you become at it, and the more you know yourself, and the better you know yourself. And once you get to know yourself better, that is, in my opinion, is when you can actually go out in the world and use all those things that we call knowledge, all these things that you can acquire relatively easy now, just maybe by a Google search. So it is the inner work that is very important, and that's what we're missing now. And as things develop, as our life develops, and as science develops, I think what is not given enough attention, generally speaking, in general, is knowing ourselves, being able to deal with ourselves, being able to accept our thoughts and emotions. So I think this is the flip side of education as we know it now. The outer knowledge, seeking the outer knowledge and the skills that we seek in traditional education.
Yes. I think one of the experiences I've had, and I always observe people expressing this, that the sense of restlessness that comes with sitting idle can be compared or is equal to, if you want to use an analogy, is like sitting with a stranger. And you wouldn't talk to a stranger if you don't know the person, or at least you don't have reason to talk to the person. And I wouldn't blame anyone. This is, obviously, I have experienced that myself, and that's where this whole quest began with. Like, I thought, I don't even know myself. How am I going to fix what's broken, or what needs to be fixed? I don't even know who I am. When I met the stranger self, that's when the quest begins. Like, what am I going to do with everything the world has to give me? I don't even know how to keep that. I don't even know how to process that, because everything begins with this identity of self. And since then, my work on loneliness has always kind of pushed me in that direction of helping people or begin the journey to self from this very first and very important step of discovering who you are. And I'm not implying that people don't know themselves, but we always evolve. Our stories don't end. As long as we are alive, our story keeps on evolving. Our story keeps on getting better, keeps getting more interesting. And that's the sense a lot of people have. So initially, meditation is difficult, yes. And I think most people give up in that early difficult phase when, one, they have to face themselves, two, there may be something unpleasant about themselves that they don't like, sense of regrets or the past decisions, or even emptiness inside. You might not like this empty wall you see within, and what you do is immediately run away and say, okay, it's better to close your eyes than face a reality. And that's why a lot of people need consistent support when they begin to meditate. In terms of loneliness, I think in the early stages, what we need to discover, in my work at least, what I teach people is discover or try to find out the kind of loneliness we are experiencing. There are three kinds that most people face. Your personal, individual loneliness, which is the absence of self, which is not knowing who you are. And that's the foundation to everything, even relationship with yourself. The second kind is your social loneliness, which is not aligning or not feeling that connection with people around you at your workplaces or in your social relationships, your friends, your relatives, even family sometimes. And the third kind is your existential loneliness, which is people are not able to make sense of their existence. Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? I may have achieved the defined success for myself. I have all the money, I have all the fame and name and position and stuff, and I still feel empty. So that's the third kind a lot of people face. So the work begins with teaching people, let's first discover what needs to be fixed before we pick our tools and before we start working. This sense of restlessness usually goes away when you know who you are. So if you're friends with yourself, then other people would want to be your friend. Other people also would want to sit with you, talk to you, because they see a sense of clarity within you. If I am lost, you wouldn't want to talk to me because I don't even know where I am, who I am, and what conversation to have. And people look for reflections or shared values in other people, and that's the basis, I think, of our relationships with people. I like it. I made a note of something you said earlier about relationships and forgiveness. You are doing a session, you're doing a webinar next month or so. One important thing I read about in a study that Harvard did, like the longest study in the history, is I think it's still on. They wanted to find out what's the most important thing in life, and they started studying kids at the age of 5, and the study lasted for 75 years. I think it's still on. And so interviewed people at different various stages, like when they were in school, when they were in college, they got married, they had their first job, whatever else was happening. And the conclusion was that the most important thing in life is relationships. It's not the money, it's not the success. And I think the basis of every relationship is knowing oneself. I can't relate to other people like if I can't relate to myself. And that's what my work has been focused on. I would definitely want to learn about your perspective on relationships from the positive psychology angle, and also forgiveness you mentioned, very important. I do have another question for you, but I would love to know more about relationships and forgiveness.
Yeah, sure. Um, Forgiveness. I had a client recently from the UK, and she came to me and she was very angry, sad, disappointed, filled with hostility. And she told me that her husband had cheated on her. And she was maybe for 10 minutes continuously talking about how bad her, her husband is and all his faults, and how she was hurt and disappointed because she thought that that was the love of her life, that it was a perfect relationship. And she talked for a long time. Uh, and then I mentioned forgiveness. I said, did it cross your mind to forgive your husband? And she was almost shocked. Forgive him? Forgive him? He doesn't care. He's not going to apologize. He doesn't deserve to be forgiven. Why should I forgive him? So our idea of forgiveness is we think it's as though it's something that we're giving the other person. It's as though it is something that makes things okay. It's condoning the act. It's saying that it's okay. It's fine that it happened. It's not that at
Yes.
all. Forgiveness, is not something that you give. So forgiveness is not something this lady is supposed to give her husband. Forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself to be free from the hurt, from the hostility, from the pain, from the anger. Um, a snake, a venomous snake doesn't really kill you. It's not the snake bite that kills you. So if you're bitten by a snake, it won't be wise to go after the snake with a club, wanting to hit the snake, wanting to hurt the snake. What you would do is you'd forget about the snake and you let the snake go in its own way, and you treat the venom inside your body. So that's what would kill you if you don't treat it. So the same thing with forgiveness. Forgiveness is the antidote to the anger that you have in your body, in your bloodstream. Forgiveness is letting go of the pain. It's letting go of the thought that things should have been different. Things that what happened is wrong and it should have been different. It's not forgetting. Sometimes there's a misconception about forgiving and forgetting. I didn't imply to this lady that she should forget what happened or forget how painful that was. It's not about forgiving. It's not about forgetting. It's about letting go and giving yourself the gift of being free and being at peace and free from all these poisonous emotions. And for most of us, I would say, there is at least one person we still have to forgive. It's usually a close friend or a family member, usually. And sometimes forgiveness, in some cases, is very difficult. Is very difficult, but it's a process. It's a process that we have to go through, and you have to be quite courageous to go through that process. But it's very important if you want to move on, if you want to rid yourself of all the negative emotions, if you want to enter a new relationship and have with a clean slate, or uh, similarly, without forgiving, until you forgive that person, all your other relationships would be to a certain extent contaminated, and would still feel this. There would still be this anger, resentment, hostility, and disappointment. Forgiveness is a big topic in positive psychology, and there's a lot of work done on that. And it's one of the positive psychology interventions. I taught a small part of that in my previous workshop, which was it was called Rewire Your Brain for Joy, and the small part was devoted to forgiveness.
So it sounds like forgiveness is the gift that you give yourself to compensate for the hurt somebody else has given you.
Yes, that's a
In
very
a
nice way
sense,
of
am I
putting
right?
that. Yes, very nice way. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I want to wrap up with I know we've had a lot, and I think I can keep going.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying the
sure.
conversation. One thing I would love to leave for people who probably would be watching our discussion is what can they take away for somebody who is experiencing loneliness, sense of emptiness, regrets, or living a life in pain, suffering of any kind. I think I would love to know more about your perspective on that. What can people do? Leave people with some tangible, some sense of hope. That's the whole objective of this conversation, right?
Yeah,
To give people hope that no matter how deep they are in the suffering, the challenges, the pain they are in today, there is a tomorrow and there is a better tomorrow. I love your comment.
yeah, sure, sure. Yeah. The first thing, the first and the most important thing that I would like to convey to a person who is suffering, whether it's from loneliness or from depression or despair, is to try somehow to tell them that things can be better. Although it's the simplest thing to say, it's probably the most difficult thing to convey. Things can be better. I would tell them, remember a time in your life when you were enjoying life. Cast your mind back to this time where things were going well, when you lived in harmony with people, when you felt that you were connected to people, that you had meaningful relationships, when you felt joy. Remember those times. Usually people who are suffering find it difficult to remember these times, because when you're suffering, you're very pessimistic about the future, and you're pessimistic also about the past, in the sense that you only see gloom and doom when it comes to your past as well. So how I try to support people in this position is help them remember the time when things were going well. And when they do, that's an important milestone, because from there we can go and say, you've experienced that before, you've been there before. I'm sure you can experience this again in the future. This is possible. Life can provide this for you, or rather, I would say, you can make things better for yourself. You can provide yourself using some tools and techniques. You can provide yourself, and you can reach the place where you were a while ago. So in positive psychology and in coaching, we try to think of when somebody's facing a challenge, we try to remind the client, and it applies to everybody, it applies to me as well. When I'm having a difficult time or when I'm facing a challenge, I go back and remind myself, yeah, I have been through a similar challenge before, and I was able to overcome that, and then try to put myself in that mindset when I was able to overcome this. What was I telling myself? How was I feeling? How was I behaving? These are all some tools that you can use to to overcome this difficulty and to know that things can be better, whether it's being depressed or being lonely, because I'm sure I would say I'm almost totally convinced that almost every single person has experienced a time when they were genuinely connected to people. So if you can remind yourself, or if you can remind this person, that bring them back to that point in time when they were feeling that they were in harmony socially, when they were actually connected somehow in a meaningful way, that condition can be replicated and can be magnified, and that's something that we can work on. So there is always hope, no matter how dark things are. There's always hope, and that is, I think, something that has to be our mission in life, because it is very easy to forget that things can be better. It's very easy to forget that there can be joy again in our lives. So, to me, my mission in life is trying to convince people, yes, things can be better. Things have been better for you, and things can be better in the future. And that's where I come in and try to do my best in providing some strategies and some practical tools where people can use.
Yeah, that's a beautiful and a powerful message for sure. And I think you speak from experience. One last thing I would say is, like, in my work, a lot of people don't step forward because they think, one, there is no way their lives can be better. We are the worst. Sometimes we are the worst critics of our own lives. And two, a lot of people don't have the right support. I mean, there may be support, but when I say right support, that means accepting people for who they are, giving them the space. One of the things that I've experienced in my work is when I teach meditation and help people find better place in their lives, is people isolate themselves. People think that they are the only one who is suffering and everybody else is thriving. And social media has made it worse. Like, people handpick the best moments of their lives, and I don't see many, although I don't use it that much, but I don't see many people who choose social media and say, I had the worst day, this happened, that happened, and I am feeling extremely lonely. If people choose social media, I think, in my limited opinion, is a very glamored wall where they would hang all their medals and all their possessions and their achievements. If we can realize that it's not just you, don't stop isolating yourself and say, I am the one who's suffering. I am on the end where there's nothing but suffering, and on the other end there is life and joy, and everybody else is thriving. That would intensify your pain, your despair, or sense of isolation. Everything is suffering. So in the Eastern philosophy, the way we describe suffering is that something that is degrading. Like, you take an example of a tree or a lamp or a human being, everything is inching or stepping towards its eventuality. A child grows and grows and grows older. You just don't get old in one day, right? Every day, every moment, you are suffering a little. Most people suffer. I'm not saying it's always the case, but most people suffer their own actions and their own reactions, and we don't realize that. And if we do realize that, then there is another layer of suffering, which is the sense of regret. So first we suffered our actions, and then we suffer the realization of our wrongdoings or the remorse we have of our past actions. That makes us even harder. So if people could accept that they are part of the suffering universe, gives them sense of inclusivity, and that's true. And
Very much so.
Second
Very
thing
much so.
is when you want to experience pain, start giving back, no matter how much you are suffering. So there was a time in my life, and I was at the peak of my suffering, the emotional and the mental pain, mental suffering, took me, or kind of got my body also involved into the suffering. So from the mental pain to physical pain, and I thought life couldn't be any worse. And how I found joy was in teaching. Can anyone imagine suffering and teaching, and then you find peace? So if we are so involved into our own pain, into our own misery, we forget that there is life beyond that. There are things beyond ourselves.
Yes.
I hope this reaches to somebody who needs to hear this. There is hope. We sleep at night and we hope we'll wake up tomorrow. But a lot of people don't. But most people do. If there was no hope, we would wind up our day and say, okay, I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow, so let me finish up everything today. We have hope. We know that. Obliviously, we have hope, but we don't just recognize that, in the sense that if we are waking up tomorrow, that's another gift, no matter how painful that is. You can take that step and you can move towards light. I know loneliness is very dark, or any kind of suffering. Depression or the pain of regrets, very painful. But like you said rightly, forgiveness starts with self. It's not about other people, it's about you being kind to yourself. And I hope this reaches to somebody who needs to hear it, and who needs a ray of hope and light in their lives. I'd feel very humble, very honored if this conversation, particularly your inputs, makes a difference in people's lives.
I hope so. I mean, there's a lot we can talk. I know the time we are, or the time is up. There's a lot I can comment on what you said, and there's a lot of wisdom in the words that you said, and I would have liked just to back them up with scientific knowledge from to have some scientific backing from positive psychology, but maybe another time, because I think the time is up.
Yeah, no. So we don't know. It's not that we can continue for as long as it needs to be. The objective is to give people hope, help someone. We can keep going, and we can have another session. This is the most unstructured conversation, you would say. We don't have a time set.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, would love to.
I have to be rushing off to a meeting. I have to prepare for a meeting soon.
Oh yes.
So, but if I can just very quickly comment on one or two things that you mentioned. You mentioned that when you're suffering, you are not alone in the world, and you're the word that you said is inclusivity. And there's been a lot of research done by Kirsten Neff. She's a pioneer in self-compassion. So in self-compassion, there are three components to being compassionate to yourself. There's being mindful, being kind to yourself, and having this feeling of inclusivity. So the last one is a feeling that you're not alone in your suffering. Every single person has suffered in some way, shape, or form. And in some way, there are people who are suffering now, and suffering is part of life. And once you are mindful of that, and once you accept that, you can start being kind to yourself. And these are the three components of self-compassion. So to be compassionate towards yourself, I'm just backing up what you said with some scientific work. That's one area, and self-compassion is also considered to be a positive psychology intervention. And another positive psychology intervention is kindness, and a lot of work has been done on kindness. And like you mentioned, when you were at the peak of your suffering, when you were having a very hard time, you found joy in teaching, in giving to other people something meaningful. And kindness is something actually ingrained in us as humans. It has evolutionary value. And when we're kind to people, that automatically brings up, creates positive emotions in us. So that's another area of positive psychology that's receiving a lot of research and a lot of work. So just a small two comments on what he said.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think everything that we do in, let's say, in your present life is a gift to yourself. And if you can just be aware that what are you gifting, love starts with self, anger, hate starts with self, regret starts with self, respect, kindness, compassion, everything, relationships, everything begins with self. And if you can just learn that whatever you are giving to other people has to flow through you, then you would be a little bit more kinder and more conscious about what am I gifting myself first and then to other people. If you're gifting yourself love, then that's what is going to reach to other people. If you're gifting yourself hate or anger, remorse, whatever else you can think of, the source is always you. The passage is also you. It flows through you. You can't be angry and give love to other people, or vice versa. You can't be happy and joyful about yourself and then reflect hate or anger on other people. It's just not
Yeah,
possible. And I think that reinforces the idea of oneness. You are one with the one who you are giving hope or love or faith or respect or whatever else, if that makes
yeah,
sense. Absolutely. It was lovely talking to you, Ibrahim. And I think there is a lot more we can talk. I would
definitely.
love to connect with you once again and share some words of wisdom. Thank you very much for joining me, and you have a great day to yourself. And
Thank you.
keep doing great work. I love the work you're
Thank you
doing.
so much, Sid, for having me and having the pleasure and the
Thank you.
honor of talking to you. And it was a very enlightening conversation. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you. Have a good day. Take care.